Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to bounce racket. Okay, anyway, this is for return of the top 10 series, and so naturally with it having been dormant for over 2 weeks, I promised you guys leading up to this point that I would more than make up for the wait, and that's exactly what I'm doing by introducing from this day forward a daily top 10 upload until December 13th. You heard that right, from now until the 13th of December, which will be the start of for 12 days of Smashmas. You are going to be getting a top 10 upload every single day. So yes, hopefully that definitely makes up for the fact that this series has been dormant for over 2 weeks now. But moving on to this top 10 that's kicking off that spree of top 10s is going to be the top 10 Skylanders post-game options, which unfortunately is nothing more than a re-upload of a previous video I made, purely because it got age restricted, and it's all because I said the word beep. So as you can tell from the edit right there, I've gone back and I've censored all of the swears, so now there's nothing non-family friendly about it all. But regardless, that's not the only thing I've edited in, even whilst the commentary has remained exactly the same. I have changed up the visual so it's a little bit more engaging visually. So yes, hopefully you guys enjoy this re-upload, and hopefully it will indeed prevent itself from being age restricted this time, thanks to my awesome editing skills. By that I mean editing out all of the swears and improving the visualization of the video tenfold. So yes, without further ado, let's roll that intro and get into the top 10. Today's topic is going to be consulting the post-game content found within the Skylanders franchise. Now, by post-game content, I don't necessarily mean the content you play after you beat the game. It can be any sort of content as long as it diverges away from the main storyline. So take Swap Force, for example, for bonus mission maps. You can play those anytime you wish. However, they aren't they aren't classed even as part of the main storyline. Therefore, I class them as post-game content. So going in to this top 10, that's practically the rule as to what content I do and do not involve in the list. And so the list is based purely on how fun the post-game content is, how much it brings to the game's overall quality, and just generally how much fun I have conducting said post-game gameplay. You know, it's a game and you play it, therefore you put two and two together as gameplay all the same. The first spot on this list was an internal debate for me at first, whether to go with score mode or swap zones, but the thing is that both of these options are practically the same thing, rehashes of the same content we've already been through from the Swap Force game, mind you, but this time with slightly different objectives, such as collect all the swap medals, don't take damage, etc, etc, and ultimately the score mode is more depthful. Okay, these levels are really fun to go back to and try and acquire the highest score possible by not getting hit, by optimizing your routes to grab collectibles, mind you. So that element of it is really fun. Unfortunately, to get high scores, it does encourage a lot more exploration of the level, so these score mode challenges aren't really fast paced. And you'll see that come up much more when I compare it to another post-game option later on. But ultimately, I don't like how uninspired these are, since they are literally just the same content that you played through previously in the game with additional objectives to go alongside them. And that can be quite boring and really hurt the pacing, because you're exploring the exact same level in the exact same manner as you did before. The score mode is just slightly more fun because it's slightly more strategical to it, and it's fun to try and acquire a new high score, even if this doesn't feel in the slightest well paced, mind you. So moving on to 9, we have quests. Now you can seek out characters like Buzz and Tessa and Superchargers, and then in Imaginators for Brain to find quests at different locations, or you can go back to main storyline missions to defeat certain enemies, stuff like that, which some of them can be really, really clever and encourage a lot more exploration on your behalf, so it's really cool when the quests are done well, but most of these are really lazy quests, which can just feel a bit tedious to go through, and in some cases even they can be frustrating and annoying to complete. I'm looking at you, most of the Brain missions and Imaginators, and it's just not well integrated post-game content. You know, you've got far superior options, so why make it so that then you have simple quests that encourage nothing but backtracking for simple objectives? It's fun, but it's simple, and it's disappointing as well, considering there are so many more things that could have been done with the post-game content, including Supercharger challenges. Now, the main problem with these challenges is that they are a pain to unlock, because not only do you need the Skylander, not only do you need a vehicle, but you need them both in a supercharged fashion. So, to unlock a single challenge, you need to buy both the Supercharger and its respective vehicle, which is a very expensive endeavour for challenges which ultimately underwhelm you, first of all, on how simple they are, and second of all, how frustrating they are to complete, because vehicles do not control well in Imaginators. They are not smooth or fluent, well, in Superchargers, I mean, my bad, but they are in Imaginators as well, and for controls, weren't really improved. So unfortunately, it's the vehicles that create the main flaw for these challenges, and the fact that they are so damn tedious to unlock, and they're not finished either, not in the slightest, because I have encountered even several physical glitches, stuff like falling through the floor and vehicles flipping over, during these challenges. So the fact that they feel very unfinished and can be quite cheap, and are ridiculously difficult for the sake of it, at least if you want to get them 3-star completed, mind you, then since they're more trouble than they're worth, it ultimately does take away from the fun, but at least they did it. They had no need to include this, and yet they did it anyway, and some of them can still be pretty fun and clever, and I love the fact that they are themed to the respective Supercharger combinations, so some thought definitely went into it, and there is at least a little bit of fun to be had when you're not being frustrated by the controls or the physical glitches occurring on screen. Now, heroic challenges at number 7 right here are better because the gameplay is much more fluent and fun, since they focus on the combat elements rather than the racing elements from Superchargers, and once again they are specifically themed to each Skylander, and it's very clever how any Skylander can play any of these challenges, but if they aren't tailored towards a specific challenge, i.e. swimming, then it can become a whole lot harder for them. So I love the fact that these challenges change from Skylander to Skylander to either increase or decrease difficulty. It's very well designed, mind you, and couldn't really be replicated in future games, considering that future games didn't have anything like swimming mechanics. So the fact that they are a unique example from its own respective game is something interesting in and of itself, and they're definitely fun to tackle, mind you, but unfortunately they're very short and very simple and far too easily cheesable, you could say. A lot of them have elements that are very, very easy to bypass unintentionally, and it just shows some really lazy and thoughtful design work, and they don't take you to any new areas either. They just use levels that you've previously played through in Spyro's Adventure. So the fact that the actual arenas you're playing in for these challenges are so uninspired and unoriginal as well doesn't help with the case of the heroic challenges. So moving on to number 6, we have Time Attack, which technically speaking every single game has had these time challenges, but they're part as for main level objectives, so that feels more tedious and more backtrack heavy, whereas the Time Attack feels far less tacked on, so to say, because it's far more unnecessary, and because of that it feels like it's more fun to go through because it doesn't feel like a chore, unlike it does in previous games. Not to mention their difficulty is far more fair because you have the timers that can stop time altogether. and it's just far more friendly for speedrunning, mind you, and not to mention the SWAT Force levels themselves are far more friendly to speedrun because they're long levels. However, with the right characters and right tactics, you can absolutely blaze through them, which is a lot of fun both to perform and to actually watch as well. Speedruns of this game are very, very skillful and an absolute blast to watch. Therefore, time attacks and separating them makes them feel like less of a chore and actually adds a lot more fun to speedrunning in these games. And I wish that they kept them separate from the objectives from the get-go, from the objectives of the main levels, I mean. So moving on to number 5, we have racing. Once again, the main downfall here is the very fact that the racing controls are a little bit floaty and not all that responsive and not as fun as for combat, mind you. Some of these tracks can also feel quite uninspired because they're based on levels of the Skylanders franchise, but at the same time they feel like Skylanders tracks, which is very important in a Skylanders racing game. So they're more well-designed than not, so to say, and really enjoyable, especially on a visual level. Unfortunately, spinning it out once you run out of health can feel a little cheap and really hurt the pacing, so I don't like how they did that. Of course, you need some sort of way to spin out like you do in Mario Kart, but I wish it was more skillful than just lock-on aiming, so to say. And it definitely could have been better if they had more tracks, because unfortunately the lack of tracks also means there's a lack of variety, so the mode can get very repetitive and boring after a while. But it's still a lot of fun to race, mind you, and it's something different as well from the old combat. So that splice of variety in there just makes Superchargers a better game for it. It's kind of like you're getting 2 games in 1. But moving on, we have elemental realms and adventure packs from Imaginators and all of the other games alike, because, you know, Imaginators also included adventure packs for the most part. And these are really, really fun. Some of them are very well designed and very fun, and you really encourage you returning to Skylanders after you've beaten the main story to check out these new levels. And not to mention, if you're struggling on a later level, you can pop on one of the adventure packs and gather some easy experience and collectibles, rather than going back and grinding old levels, which could be considered boring and tedious and repetitive. So I'm glad that they have that sort of strategy to it, and of course they also have a physicality to it, since you get a physical toy in order to unlock an adventure pack. So it's always great having that physical thing to remember the level by. It generally makes these levels more memorable. But with that being said, the main downfall for these levels, and the main reason why they're not any lower on the list, is that they are such a mixed bag. For Empire of Ice, Pirate Seas, Dragon's Peak, Sunscraper Spire, and Midnight Museum, and the Enchanted Elven Forest are all pretty bad levels, if I'm being honest. They don't feel all that inspired and generic, and not to mention they're terribly paced with constant mini-games that aren't even all that fun to begin with, and just elemental themes rather than something far more creative and well designed. However, the others are an absolute blast and well designed, and the same can be said for Elemental Realms from Imaginators as well, which it's really annoying that they can only be unlocked by senseis of the same element. Trap Team did the same cheap tactic where you needed to get the gimmick characters of each element, rather than using for several hundreds of Skylanders you've collected already. It's such a cash grab, and it felt so cheap at the time that only Imaginators could open them, or senseis even. Not even your Imaginators could open them, so you buy a Tech Creation Crystal expecting to open up the Tech realm, considering that, you know, it's still a gimmick from the game of the same element as the realm, and you still can't unlock it. It's quite ridiculous. That, like, seriously, have incentive enough to buy the senseis without them being forced down your throats in order to unlock elemental realms, which most of the time aren't even all that good, mind you. So moving on to number 3, where there is a much finer line of quality for bonus mission maps, because these are far more well thought out, fast paced, because they're short and simple, so because of that they never really feel like a drag and are constantly moving forward in terms of the gameplay. They control perfectly, they have such few glitches to avoid frustration, and they feel fair and challenging, so that then any mistake made generally feels like it's your own fault. So that's great design right off the bat. Unfortunately, these do use the same templates as for levels in Swap Force, which is a huge downgrade to the otherwise really original, unique content that they provide, since they all have the same theme, and is what I'm saying from all of this: jungle, desert, place on fire, and of course ice. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but that doesn't take away too much from the fun little diversion they create from the main gameplay, and it's a really good thing to burn some time with after the main story if you're tired of going through the same levels again and again via the score mode and the time attack, which, as I was mentioning about previously, the time attack is a far superior way of returning to these levels, because it's far more fast-paced since you're speeding through them and using strategic means to gain time. But number 2 is going to be the arenas. Now, arenas were originally PvP based only, and if you didn't have any friends or family members that wanted to play, then you could never partake in those really fun challenges. But when you did have those PvP battles, they were intense, fast paced, and really, really fun. Unless you was using an OP character, aka Drobot, because playing an OP character isn't fun for you, because they're OP, so you don't feel like you've earned for win, and they certainly aren't fun for the person you're playing against. They're more frustrating than anything. So the lack of balance is really the main flaw with a PvP arena. But otherwise, it's really, really fun to duke it out with your friends and create for some really intense matches as you try to use strategy to your advantage, such as running away and finding power-ups, so on and so forth. And of course, in Giants, they also introduced a way to play through arenas in single player, with you fighting off against enemies and having certain challenges along the way, which made the arenas generally really fun and varied as well. They never felt repetitive or boring in any fashion, and they were actually challenging as well. So it was fun to have an actual challenge in a Skylanders game, especially for one-hit kill scenarios. They were very fun to play through, mind you. And so naturally, it's just a perfect blend of multiplayer and single-player content that adds a fun, unique challenge. And really the main downfall is the lack of balance between Skylanders and the fact that the single-player arenas all utilize the same backgrounds and levels, so that can be quite boring on a visual level. But apart from that, they are great all the same, and only pale in comparison to our number 1 slot, the Chaos Doom challenges, which we might have had player versus player previously, as you and your friends duke it out. But this mode is far superior because it's all about working together, and ultimately because you're both victorious in the end, it's more satisfying for both parties. And the Chaos Doom challenge is just so well constructed because you have several things to worry about. You have your towers, the enemies, the hazards, the traps, the mystery box of doom. And because of all of these things that you have to worry about, it just makes it so much fun and fast-paced. And because it demands concentration, you're constantly invested in the mode. And since it's wave-based and it gets harder as it goes along, creating for a very, very difficult challenge, especially on Nightmare mode. And it's also very friendly to creating your own challenges with it, so you can go through without any towers, without villains. So its customization that it can provide is really, really fleshed out, and above all, it's a shame that they never brought this back because it's just so fast-paced and investing due to the sheer concentration and the fact that it's a team-based mode encouraging team-based gameplay. Just makes it for more fun to perform with others rather than against others. And the Chaos Doom Challenge is by far my favourite piece of post-game content found in Skylanders, since fighting enemies is one of the most fun thing in Skylanders. In fact, it is the most fun thing to do in Skylanders. It's kind of the thing that found in Skylanders and what made it so fun to begin with. So the fact that this mode is completely oriented around that, no puzzles, no platforming, just pure combat, makes it such a blast. And I truly can't emphasize that enough, which is why this post-game content and this post-game content alone has got #1 spot on my list right here. But that basically does it for this top 10. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you next week for the double upload of top 10s. But until that moment arises, peace.